That was your season 1 finale, right?
Yeah.
And we were just chatting briefly, maybe you can hear it because we have mics on, about the fact that this was, you know, I mean, the interesting thing about this show, as a matter of fact, we were talking about it in my office, is that it covered the range from this real total camp and outrageous storylines, and then it would touch on very serious issues, sometimes veering back and forth in the course of one episode, so that there would be a serious storyline and a comic storyline at the same time. And that's, you know, perhaps one of the challenges of working on it, but also one of the interesting things about the show. And this coming just so soon, this was the year 2000 or 2001?
2001.
2001, just a year and a half.
No,
or so.
it might have been, we shot it in 2000.
Yeah. Not long after Matthew Shepard was murdered in Wyoming. So, touching on a very contemporary issue, that's for sure.
I mean, they always did that. They were they would have a, you know, a political or a social sort of theme or idea that they would make the storyline sort of intentionally.
Did you have, I want to move on to your theater career that you've had since the show, but I did want to ask, since you talked about how your character did develop and change during the course of the 5 years, did you have input into that, or was that entirely written for you?
We had very little input. They were open and they would listen to us, but they definitely, the executive producers and the head writers had very strong ideas about what they wanted to do and how they wanted to do it.
So how would you characterize the way that your character changed? He went from being a naive high school student.
He kind of always, it's been a long time, I don't remember it extraordinarily well. He definitely went through a really, really aggressive phase that was sort of brought on by this violence that seemed sort of out of character. I mean, I feel like fundamentally the core of the character stayed the same because he sort of represented a specific thing within, you know, the world of the characters. That being sort of an openness and like a pure love and kind of a naivete, but not really. I mean, there's a sophisticated sort of wisdom about him, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was always there, or less so there. I mean, he's young.
Well, you played the character beautifully, and it was very believable throughout. I mean, that's one thing that always impressed me.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So, one of the lucky things about appearing in, aside from the fame and money and et cetera, all the wonderful perks and flying first class and getting the hot towels, is that you get the opportunity to do a lot of theater that you might not otherwise have had the opportunity to do. It kind of opens doors, doesn't it?
Well, actually not. It opens doors in a different way. I mean, Queer as Folk, the job whatever fame or whatever people knew about me from the show didn't actually translate into many jobs.
Oh, is that right?
No. But what it did is give me financial security from which to, it was sort of like starting from scratch while the show, you know, towards the end of the show, starting a career from scratch, partially because it's shot in Toronto, so I didn't have any opportunity to be in New York, to be meeting casting directors, to be meeting directors, to be doing readings, to be going to theater, to be a part of a theater or film community that I could actually join when the show was over, because it was shooting in Toronto. I can't work in Toronto unless I get an American show that shoots there.
Yeah.
So I had to sort of start from scratch when the show was over. So I didn't know any casting directors. I would be off maybe 3 to 6 months a year, and I would audition a few times, but usually get some other kind of work when I was off the show. So I wasn't really I didn't have a chance to develop relationships.
So were you thinking, you know it's the last season of the show while you're shooting it, and you think, gee, what am I going to do after this? Were you formulating a plan? And of what?
I always knew I was going to go back to theater, because especially after 5 years of being in front of a camera, I felt really stagnated and really, just physically, I needed to do something expansive vocally and physically. I wanted to be on the stage. I felt like I'd been acting like this big for 5 years and it was getting tedious. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I knew I was going back to theater. I wasn't sure. I think I did Wicked before I finished shooting Queer as Folk, actually. I think I did it before the last season.
Yeah, so that's your Broadway debut, your replacement for, what did you say, 6 weeks?
Yeah, for 5 weeks. I went in with the whole original cast except for the guy I was replacing. So I was sort of there at the beginning, which was cool. Yeah, but I think I did that before the end of the show, so I kind of knew I'd find work. Something like that.
How did you end up booking that one?
What's great is I'd done a play. This is how it always happens. It's people you know, not like it's people you meet and have had relationships with more than ever just auditioning as a stranger and getting a job. It almost never happens that way. But I did a play off Broadway. There's these big casting directors, Bernie Telsey casting. He cast so much. And I actually auditioned for a movie part that he called me in for repeatedly. I didn't end up getting it. But then he also runs a theater company, a small off-Broadway theater company. So then they offered me a play that they were doing off-Broadway. So I ended up doing that. And from that, I had a relationship with Telsey Casting and Bernie. They knew I'm professional and they liked me. And then they cast Wicked. So like the next year, the next hiatus of Queer as Folk, I was in New York and I had this opportunity. This guy was leaving. The original guy who played Bach in Wicked, he's like a munchkin, is that what they're called in Wizard of Oz?
Yeah, I think so, yes.
It sounds offensive. And he turns into the Tin Man. He was leaving town to do Midsummer Night's Dream up at Williamstown, so they had this role open on Broadway for just a limited amount of time, and he knew me, and they called me in. And because I knew them, I still had to audition, but the thing is, once you know a casting director, and they've cast you before, so you know that they don't think you're a total moron, it's so much easier to audition for them because you know they respect you and you're not freaking out. So I auditioned well, which rarely happens, and got Wicked.
And so what was that like being, you studied musical theater and then you didn't end up pursuing it.
I hadn't done it.
There you are in the biggest Broadway musical in town.
It's enormous. I felt totally comfortable with doing the material, singing, and it was kind of second nature to me. What was interesting is I'd never been a replacement before, and if any of you guys do musicals or do things where you're replacing, first of all, big musicals, the role, because they're mass-produced on such a huge level, Wicked, there's productions all over the world, and there's touring productions touring in different countries and different continents. Because they're mass-produced, roles aren't even roles, they're called tracks. Which is, I remember when I first learned that in college, I was sort of really disgusted with it. It just is so impersonal. But yeah, you fit a slot in a machine that already exists. So it was really interesting for the first time. I knew that's what it would be, so I was prepared, but going in and having to, fit into a role that's already been created by someone else and having to hit the marks that, he and the director had decided on a year ago. Or if you go in now, something somebody came up with 9 years ago or however.
Yeah.
And also, what's interesting is I never rehearsed with other actors. It was just me and the stage manager in a room that's taped off the size of the stage, and there's numbers along the front of the stage, so you know where you need to stand. You have to be on 10 and 4 by the time you say this line. It's like you're at geometry class while you're on stage. And I never had the other actors. You're just
you didn't work with them at all till you got on stage with them?
No, I had 2 weeks of rehearsal, and I maybe rehearsed 4 days a week. I probably rehearsed 8 times before I made my Broadway debut or something like that. It was insane. It was really cool though. No, I rehearsed with the music director and the stage manager, and then I had one put in, right maybe the Friday before I went on a Saturday with the understudies, but not the people I would actually be playing with the understudies, and it wasn't costume or because it paid the union for stagehands is so strong they can't afford to pay them to come in, so I never did it with the set, which is really scary.
You never did it with the set?
No, not until I did it for real.
Oh my gosh.
And the set is huge and weighs bazillion tons, so, and it comes down on you out of nowhere. It really is.
It is dangerous.
He's like, be careful because the set's going to be flying in from here. You have to be on this number. But the first time you do it, people are pushing you and pulling you.
Did they let you wear the costume at least?
I was wearing the costume and the put-in, but I was the only one.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because then you have I had a few quick changes, I have to run up a flight of stairs and get spray painted silver and everything.
But it all came together. And how was your first night after that?
It was terrifying. The thing is, Wicked is so big. I remember thinking, no one's gonna know if I don't. It's so huge that it's liberating. The house is 1,100. It's over 1,000. The Gersh.
Yeah, it's almost 2,000, I think.
Yeah, it's
huge theater.
Huge. So, you know, you're like that to most people in the audience. So they don't really notice it. You're like, oh my God. But you learn it really fast, and people who do those, I mean, people who do Broadway musicals are so skilled and so professional. And there's people who cover like 10 roles. I mean, I don't know if I'm exaggerating, I think it could probably be true, but a lot of those roles, and have to go in, you're like, oh, track number 5 today, what are you doing today? And they just know everywhere they're supposed to stand at every given moment.
Yeah.
So thank God, you know, they've been doing, I mean, they helped me.
Yeah.
You know, it took probably a week before I wanted friends to come see me. Like, all right, I know where I'm supposed to stand now, you can come. So it's a crazy experience, it's really fun.
So that hasn't encouraged you to want to do more Broadway musicals?
I do. I mean, since Queer as Folk, I've been very commitment phobic as far as jobs. Like, I like doing something for a small amount of time, knowing what I'm doing, putting all my energy into it, and then being done. So, and Broadway contracts now are like, tend to be, I think they're like a year over a year now, which I think would be really hard for me. Because you can't do anything else when you're doing a musical.
No.
You can't have a drink with your friends. You can't.
Not even a drink?
You wouldn't. It drives you out. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're doing 8 shows a week, especially if you have to sing a lot, you're like straight to bed. You're drinking tea. You're laying in bed all day. You're not talking. I mean, for a year, it's a lot. I mean, that's hard. TV, you don't have to do that.
It's a commitment.
It's a real commitment, and it's it's your entire life. Every minute of every day.
But it's also a commitment to do some of the other things that you've been doing.
It is, but that I can give, all right, 3 months I'm out of commission. Like, no one's going to see me for 3 months. I'm going to be busy working on this.
Yeah.
But then at the end of 3 months, I'm back.
Well, and like some of these roles are just spectacular parts. You did Alan Strang in Equus, you did Mozart in Amadeus, you did, we just did One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest here last year, and you played Billy Bibbit in that. Where was that production?
That was at BTF, Berkshire Theatre Festival. It's a theater I found. It didn't exist before. It's this great, amazing theater that's been around for like 85 years. It's one of the earliest summer theaters in Massachusetts that I started working in after Wicked. Actually, Stephen Schwartz's son, knew of me because I did Wicked with his father, and he's a director. And so I auditioned again, but he knew of me and cast me as Equus. That was the first play I did up at Berkshire Theatre Festival. And it's just those lovely lovely actors, a wonderful artistic director, so it's a place I started going every summer.
Can you go out for drinks after those performances, or is that...
Alan Strang was not so much. But as long as you're not singing, it's okay if your voice is a little tired.
Yeah.
So I played a lot of amazing parts there. I mean, when Queer as Folk ended, the main focus was to do as diverse an amount of material as I could find. I didn't care where it was. And I wanted to work on the great writers of theater that I've been studying and the reason I became an actor was, to work on Shakespeare, to work on Shaw, to work on Beckett, to work on Ibsen.
Yeah, and you got all of those opportunities.
Right, and that's been my focus since it ended, and that's what I've been doing.
Tell us just a little bit, and I want to open this up for questions, about what you're doing now in this production umbrella organization that you've developed.
Something that I would recommend to every actor and writer and director here is to make your own work. It's the most important thing you can do, because you can't expect other people to give you the amount of opportunities that you deserve and that you need to be fulfilled. I actually just copied so many of my friends who I went to college with, especially people who went on to grad programs, because they tend to be really aware of this then, especially grad directors, is they started nonprofit organizations so that they could raise money so that they could produce their own theater. And if you're making theater, especially the nonprofit is the way to go. So we started a nonprofit, a group of my friends and I, so that we could raise money so it would be tax deductible, people who donated, and create our own work, produce our own work. And I started it with a group of friends, mostly actors, also writers and directors, and initially thinking we would make theater, but we did a lot of readings and we developed new theater work, but we haven't produced a full-on production. It's been much easier, which you will find if you haven't already, to make film is so easy to make on your own. So we ended up making a short, and we shot a feature that we've had one edit on, and that we're now re-editing. Yeah, so that's what that organization
Yeah, but
is.
that is such good advice. I mean, you really just take it into your own hands and
You have to.
do your own work.
You have to, because you're always going to be frustrated. And it's also so much more rewarding. And you realize why you're actually doing it. If you're just, nobody's going to give you the right job. Like, a job is always almost what you want to be doing. And when you're producing your own work, you have nothing to hide behind. You have no excuse. And you really start to realize, this is what I care enough to actually, like, build the set myself. And, you know, so this is what I can. It helps you know who you are as an artist and grow significantly more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really important. And also, I mean, my opportunity on getting a television show was a complete fluke and really rarely happens, and I'm so grateful for it and grateful to have been a part of it. But I have friends who, while I was doing, suddenly got the show. They were like, what? How does that happen to somebody? And they were, you know, starting theater companies, and now, you know, I have friends who are making a living producing and starring in amazing plays, touring Europe all the time because they've been developing their own art for like 10 years, and now they get grants left and right. You know, they're getting residencies at the Almeida in London because they were doing this. Or I have friends who, you know, were always making, you know, funny videos all the time, and then had a viral video that suddenly got like a million hits on YouTube in one day, and was the first one signed to ICM when they started a new media division, which just happened, you know, because suddenly the big agencies were realizing that, you know, online media is significant, and now has like the most powerful agent in the world, and is, you know, writing for televisions and making for television and making shorts and things like that, because he made, just because he was doing what he loved, because he was making funny videos with his friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the word fluke, there was a mention of that in the Sunday New York Times article about Bye Bye Birdie, and one of the authors of that said, whenever a good show comes together, it's really a fluke.
Yeah.
It's a fluke, always.
You can't control, yeah.
You can't. But that's right. I mean, that's the point, the very point you're making, and that's what, unfortunately, we have to rely on a lot of the time in the theater. But you can make flukes happen to a certain degree.
Right.
You know, you can influence a fluke, right?
Right.
Okay, well, why don't we see if there are any questions from the audience?